Steam Deck takes out another PC handheld, this time before it even has the chance to launch. Yeah, Acer sounds like they're giving up on the Nitro Blaze before the release date, and what's worse is they're blaming the Steam Deck. What's up with that? Rockstar adds a new anti-cheat to GTA 5, and in the process they remove GTA Online support for the Steam Deck, and then they tell Valve that it's their problem to fix. Valve is once again being a tad bit sneaky. First, there's a tease of something big as they head to Australia next month, and then we get news that confirms Proton on ARM is real. Yes, you heard that correctly. Valve is in fact working on a version of their translation library called Proton that would allow the Steam library to be playable on ARM devices. What exactly are they up to? Final Fantasy XVI plays better on deck than expected, and I was wrong about God of War Ragnarok. It is playable on deck, but it's not playable for everybody. What's good, Deck Gang? My name is Rich. This is my weekly Deck News Roundup where I bring you the latest news around the Steam Deck, other PC handhelds, and PC gaming at large. There are chapters for everything, so let's go ahead and get started with that first story, shall we? Earlier this month, Acer threw their hat in the PC handheld ring by announcing the Nitro Blaze. It was a relatively unremarkable announcement. The specs didn't offer anything unique compared to the ROG Ally, and the form factor provided none of the charm of something like the Lenovo Legion Go or even the Zotac Zone. In short, it looked like Acer announced a handheld because they felt like they had to announce a handheld. Perhaps that would explain the comments they made in an interview with digitaltrends.com. Shout out to Digital Trends for the interview, and shout out to Baldly Rudy for sharing this on Twitter because I wouldn't have seen it otherwise, but it is truly fascinating. You know, the Steam Deck has made it so that handhelds have become thought of as the next frontier for PC gaming, and when Luke Larson of Digital Trends asked Jerry Kao, the COO of Acer, if he felt the same way, Jerry said this, quote, "We do not believe it is a big market, but when people think about gaming, Acer is one of their choices, so we shouldn't be absent. But do we think there will be a big success? My personal opinion up until now is not so optimistic," end quote. Well, not with that attitude, buddy. Who's gonna wanna buy a PC gaming handheld that was made simply because the manufacturer felt like they shouldn't be absent in this market? Is it just me? I think that's so weird. Acer has so many things they could be investing in when it comes to PC gaming or just technology. Why would they choose to invest money in a market that they don't believe will be a big success? Furthermore, why don't they think it'll be a big success? To that question, Jerry Kao turns his focus to the Steam Deck. According to the article, quote, Kao went on to discuss that pricing was at the heart of the problem. The Steam Deck kicked off the category at such a low price point that it made scaling up from there very difficult. As he notes, even the ROG Ally had to drop its price to compete, end quote. Now, this is a somewhat fair point and one that I've mentioned on this channel in the past. Valve has a pretty serious advantage when it comes to releasing hardware. They can release hardware as a loss leader with the understanding that they'll make up for a lot of that loss by selling games on the Steam store. What's surprising to me, however, is that companies like Acer, so not boutique companies like Ioneo and 1xPlayer, but companies like Acer and Asus, they have a huge advantage of their own. They already make and distribute hardware at an incredibly large scale. That should get them better deals with all sorts of vendors, including parts manufacturers, shipping companies, and warehouses. They also have built-in relationships with stores like Best Buy and Micro Center. Sure, Valve doesn't have to profit off of each Steam Deck sold, but I would have thought that their cost, to begin with, would be higher than the likes of Acer and Asus. And to be fair, I shouldn't put Asus in the same sentence as Acer here. I've had my criticisms of Asus in the past, rightfully so, but one of the things I like about what they're doing with the ROG Allies is that they have the courage, or maybe delusion depending on how you look at it, to think that they can beat the Steam Deck. This is important because if you think you can beat the competition, you're just going to make a better product than if you make something because you have to, because you think you shouldn't be absent from this market. Don't get me wrong, it's still an uphill battle. It's pretty tough to beat the holy trinity of the Steam Deck, the ROG Ally, and the Legion Go, but I'm not gonna lie, Acer, if you don't want to try, then we don't want you here. Speaking of things that don't want you here, Grand Theft Auto 5 just celebrated its 11th birthday on September 13th. Naturally, Rockstar couldn't let us all have a wonderful moment to celebrate the sinning sandbox now being 11 years old. No, why would they do that? Instead, they updated GTA 5 and the Rockstar game launcher with BattlEye anti-cheat, which I'm sure was incredibly successful at preventing all the cheating. In case you're wondering, I'm not even trying to put any Rockstar footage in my video here. Notoriously, they demonetize anything that shows footage of their games, so I'll just show you a video of the GTA-like that can never get enough love, sleeping dogs. In any case, one consequence of adding BattlEye anti-cheat is that this broke compatibility with Steam Deck and Linux gamers at large. When asked if they were pleased with the job they'd done of angering gamers, they reportedly responded, "What's there to be happy about? Job's not finished. Job finished? I don't think so." Although I did make that last part up, they did in fact double down on their deleterious deeds by updating their FAQ with the following question and answer. The question asked simply, is BattlEye compatible with Steam Deck? And the answer replies, quote, Steam Deck does not support BattlEye for GTA Online. I'm sorry, I have to stop here. First of all, Steam Deck does support BattlEye. I'm aware that some companies are reticent to support online gaming on Linux, but I'd much rather they said it with their chest than pin the problem on the portable. Even then, they had to intentionally twist the wording in a sentence in order to sort of not lie, because they didn't actually say the Steam Deck doesn't support BattlEye. They said it doesn't support BattlEye for GTA Online. All of this is a lot like saying FSR3 doesn't support the Steam Deck. Like, sure, I guess you could say it that way, but nobody would ever put those words in that order. Anyway, it continued, quote, you will be able to play GTA 5 story mode, but unable to play GTA Online. Note, GTA 5 and GTA Online are not officially supported on Steam Deck, and all technical support questions should be directed to Valve's Steam Deck support content and community, end quote. By the way, there goes that passive voice again. They said that GTA 5 and GTA Online are not officially supported on Steam Deck, which what they actually mean is that Rockstar are not officially supporting this game on Steam Deck. The way they worded it made it seem like the Steam Deck itself was at fault. Now, I'll be honest, I don't play GTA Online. It never interested me, although I did enjoy watching some of the stuff that came out of the role-playing servers. Nonetheless, this doesn't impact me, but it does impact a ton of other people, so I think that you should be aware of this. And if you want to request a refund, you should at least try. Chances are that Valve is not going to approve your refund, but a few people do seem like they've been able to get their money back, so it's worth it to try, and it lets Valve and Rockstar know how many people are affected by something like this. As an aside, this update to the Rockstar launcher once again leaked the fact that Red Dead Redemption is coming to PC. At this point, that should come as no surprise. There have been several leaks over the last few months, but I'm going to say this. Even aside from the BattlEye thing, Rockstar have been, let's just say, not so great lately. The GTA HD trilogy was pretty horrendous, and it came with the delisting of the original games. GTA 6 seems pretty rife with issues in development. I don't know. It's nice to have one less game locked to consoles, but am I particularly excited for Red Dead Redemption 1? Not really. So this next story is actually a huge deal, particularly for the very long-term future of Steam. It has now leaked via SteamDB and data miner Sadly It's Bradley that Valve are indeed working on Proton ARM. That is a version of Proton that will work on ARM devices and presumably make much of your Steam library playable on such devices. Proton is, of course, the translation layer that allows the Steam Deck to be possible in its current state. Proton makes Windows games playable on Linux by providing alternative implementations to various Windows APIs that control things like rendering 3D graphics and reading inputs from user input devices like control pads, mice, and keyboards. Proton ARM is going to be considerably more involved because the goal there is to take executables meant for x86 and x64 devices like your desktop and laptop and make those executables able to be run on ARM devices. Of course, ARM CPUs power a lot of modern devices like smartphones, MacBooks, the Nintendo Switch, and importantly, standalone VR headsets. The reason that bit of information is pertinent here is that it appears that the primary initial target of this work that Valve is undertaking is VR, likely their own headset that has long been in development, codenamed the Deckard. We learned a few things from this SteamDB leak, and I want to give a huge thank you to Sadly It's Bradley for putting a lot of this information together. Please be sure to check out his YouTube channel and Twitter, where he shares information like this whenever he discovers it. First, we learned that Proton ARM is listed internally as a compatibility tool alongside Waydroid. We also know that some select VR games have been secretly pushing Android ARM builds onto the Steam store. Despite being built for Android ARM, these games can run on Linux ARM using Waydroid and therefore do not need Proton ARM whatsoever. This leak also exposed that there are other Windows PC VR games that, instead of pushing a native Android ARM build, are testing the use of Proton ARM and FEX to run these games on ARM. The most popular examples of games that are testing this are Beat Saber and Gorilla Tag. Surprisingly, we have no sign of Half-Life Alyx anywhere yet. Furthermore, it seems that Proton ARM can be used to translate from either Windows x86 executables or Windows ARM executables. Wine, which is the basis for Proton, has been getting a lot of updates that ensure an easy translation from Windows ARM to Linux ARM. Now, although a lot of this activity has been around VR games, non-VR games look like they're being tested using Proton ARM as well. Gabe Newell has long been a proponent for the idea of head-mounted displays, one day surpassing flat displays for gaming in general. So in his vision, that applies as much to flat games as it does to games that are made specifically for VR. There's a theater mode in Steam VR that is focused on playing flat games on a big screen, and according to Sadly It's Bradley, it even has a secret configuration setting to activate stereoscopic 3D. To that end, Brad suggests that people should imagine this as someone making an Apple Vision Pro focused on the Steam gaming library, since that's the direction that AR and VR is headed towards. Naturally, this sort of work benefits non-VR devices, and it could mean that we'll also eventually get a version of Steam available on ARM Linux. Coincidentally, the Meta Quest 3S leaked in the same time frame with the aggressive price point of $299. That said, these two events are not likely related, and the understanding amongst data miners is that Valve is upset about this information getting out. That may indicate that this work is still considerably far out, with the public unlikely to see it come to fruition until at least next year. And here's a little copium for people that are still waiting for Steam Deck to release in more regions. The announcement for PAX Australia, or PAX Aus, made a somewhat big deal of Steam being part of the exhibitor lineup, joining the likes of Asus, Intel, Blizzard, and Ubisoft. They say, quote, "While on the topic of love, PAX Aus welcomes Steam for the first time ever. More on that when the show opens. You're not going to want to miss it," end quote. PC Gamer covered this, and I think their conclusion here is a sound one, as they believe this may signal that Valve is getting ready to release the Steam Deck in Australia. Famously, Japan and Australia were mentioned as countries that Valve wanted to bring the Steam Deck to after the initial launch. We did get an East Asia launch about a year after the initial release, but up until now, they have not been able to make good on their goal to release their PC handheld in the upside down, the down under. Hopefully this is their chance to do so, and it would be awesome if they could set their sights on Brazil and other regions too. God of War Ragnarok launched on Steam last week, and although it plays incredibly well on deck, there are at least a couple disappointments about Sony's latest release on Steam. First of all, the Steam store page still says that it requires a PSN login. However, this requirement is thankfully not present on the Steam Deck, but only the Steam Deck. It appears that Sony has made an exception to their login requirement for the Steam Deck specifically, and while it's nice to be able to avoid the login, it would be beneficial to all players if it was optional on all PC platforms. Furthermore, the PSN login is handled by the PSN overlay, which itself is not compatible with Linux. So if you're using Linux but not on a Steam Deck, then you will have to provide a launch option to trick the game into believing you're actually using the deck. A minor inconvenience to be sure, but one that only underscores the meaninglessness of this distinction from Sony. Finally, the flimsy PSN requirement also means that this game remains region locked and is unavailable for purchase to many Steam users. Admittedly, if you're able to play this game, it looks phenomenal on Steam Deck, and in addition to being a visual marvel, God of War Ragnarok also supports Steam Input API. This gives you the best experience for remapping buttons in Steam because you can map them to game-specific actions like light attack, heavy attack, block, sprint, aim, and more. Again, God of War Ragnarok is an absolute showcase of what's possible on deck. It's great to see it get verified, and it's great to see Sony relax their stance a little bit on the PSN login, but their PC strategy is not well thought out, and I think they need to head back to the drawing board for a consistent and thoughtful approach to PC gaming. Speaking of that, it also leaked that Sony is working on two seemingly uninspiring remasters, Horizon Zero Dawn and Days Gone. At this point, Sony might as well come on stage and rip a Bloodborne disc in half like Hulk Hogan ripping the tank top off his chest. It would literally be less disrespectful than what they're putting Bloodborne fans through right now. The two games in question, being 7 and 5 years old respectively, hardly seem like good candidates for a remaster, though I will say that Sony typically handles these situations better than most, they often give a reasonable upgrade path for owners on PlayStation consoles, like they did with Ghost of Tsushima Definitive Edition. Now, this is going to be a curious situation on PC, given that Days Gone and Horizon Zero Dawn are the first notable PlayStation games to come to Steam back in 2020 and 2021. It is quite possible that this will mark the first remasters for Sony on the Steam platform. If true, I'd like to see Sony offer Steam players a proper upgrade path as they normally do on PlayStation. On the subject of PlayStation games coming to PC, Final Fantasy XVI appears to be playing on the Steam Deck better than expected. Now, that's not to say it's a great experience, but it is relatively playable. This comes courtesy of Steam Deck HQ, and Noah there says, quote, "This game does have some hefty requirements, making it much harder to run on most hardware without some upscaling help. Thankfully, the game has DLSS, FSR, and XeSS, so there are definitely options, but it does mean some of the game could be blurry." He goes on to say, quote, "This is certainly the case with the Steam Deck when trying to play the game. It's hefty and absolutely needs upscaling to make the game playable from my time so far. FSR 3 at performance with all low settings is the best. With this, I was getting around 30 to 36 FPS in fights, with some slight drops to 28 in larger fights or walking around very crowded cities and towns." End quote. He says the game experience is a bit unstable at first, but that FF16 held 30 FPS surprisingly well in the fights that mattered. He also noted, however, that the cutscenes were the opposite, almost never hitting 30 FPS. So, although this is not an ideal experience for the deck hardware, it's good to know that it's possible to play if that's the only hardware you have. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past has been made into a roguelike, and you absolutely have to try it. It's called The Legend of Zelda: Dungeons of Infinity, and it's not a ROM hack, but instead it was made in Game Maker Studio from scratch using the original assets from the game. It's a procedurally generated dungeon crawler. It has new features added as well as new assets that were given special care to ensure that they still look and feel like they're from the original game. You descend through the dungeon while finding weapons, items, and treasures to help you beat Link's nemesis, Aghanim, and the layouts, enemies, items are all randomly generated every time you play, and of course if you die you have to start at the beginning of the dungeon. This is an absolute labor of love, and man, it really shows. Given that it was made in Game Maker, it should play well on whatever handheld you own. Definitely go grab it before it goes away. And there's huge news for fans of PS3 emulation because the PSN emulator RPCN has just been updated to 1.3, which includes matchmaking support for franchises such as Armored Core, Dragon Ball, Gran Turismo, Ridge Racer, Street Fighter, and Tekken. By updating your PS3 to the latest version, you should then be able to play these games online if you're able to find an opponent. If there's a game you're looking for that is not on this list, you should note that according to the devs at RPCS3, many games, like Skate 3, do require custom servers, so although the PS3 netplay may be implemented, there would be no server for the game to connect to unless the community is able to one day reverse engineer the servers and come up with their own replacements. Still though, this is an exciting development and some very good news to end the week on. All right, folks, that's going to do it for this week's episode. I hope you're all having a wonderful week. Deck Gang out. Goodbye.